Welcome back to Data Discovery. You are watching Module 4, Evaluating Data. In this module, our main focus is understanding how to evaluate data on a specific topic. When we narrow down to a specific research question, there are key factors to consider when searching for and assessing specific datasets and products. These factors include the data producer, geography, time period, level of observation, variables, data format, and the cost and access associated with the data. As before, let us use our example topic. Our research question is, what is the impact of the housing costs on racialized populations in urban areas in Ontario, with a couple of ideas for quantifiable data. More specific research questions include, how much income is spent on rent? And how much has it changed in the past 10 years? We must also ask the question, who is responsible for collecting and publishing data about affordable housing? Each level of government has different responsibilities when it comes to housing. In this case, affordable housing. It is closely tied to legislation and policy as well. The major source at the federal level will be from Statistics Canada, as they collect data about income and census data and conduct the Canadian Housing Survey. The provinces and municipalities also collect data about affordable housing. Other sources could include academic researchers, research institutes, nonprofits, and lobby groups. It is also useful to list diverse ways the data are collected. Before you start looking for a data set, it is important to consider the level of observation and the population you are studying. In this case, it is individuals from a racialized group. When you find the data set, you must ask, does it collect data about the population you are studying? And if so, how is that population defined and categorized? Geography is also important. If we go back to our topic, our research focuses on urban areas in Ontario. Depending on the dataset, we may get data at the level of Canada or the provinces or territories, but we may also get it down to the level of a census metropolitan area in Ontario or a municipality in Ontario. You should also consider the data's time period and frequency. It is important to ask these questions. What time period are you researching? Are you looking to compare data through time? And if so, with what frequency or intervals are the data available? You should also find out what is the most current data available and what delays are there in the release of the data. Now, we want to think about what variables you may want to study or research. This provides you with clarity on what is being measured in the dataset that you find. It is also important to think of different search terms that you can use, as this will assist you in understanding how a variable may be coded or categorized. This is where you examine the intersectional aspects of your topic by including other demographic variables, such as age, gender, immigrant, non-immigrant, and others. This will form your personalized checklist, which will help you compare different data products. As for the format of the data source, this is also something you need to consider. Data are published in many different formats, and how you interact may depend upon your knowledge and ability of how to interpret and analyze data in a given format. Some data formats require a learning curve, such as data in a statistical software format, where you need additional technical skills and knowledge to manipulate and process the data in a statistical application, whereas others may be easier to use, such as an aggregate data table or a chart. Finally, we must consider the level of access and the data production and distribution cost. A lot of government information is free of cost and is available through open data portals. But even then, it is important to read the license agreements for data from open sites, because the end user agreements or license agreements will tell you how you can reuse or publish the data, as well as how to cite the data. This would be the case for most of the data on this research topic. At York University, we are part of the Data Liberation Initiative. As a result, we subscribe to have access to the public use microdata files from Statistics Canada, and you have access as a York University researcher via Odyssey. But once you graduate, you would have to contact Statistics Canada directly to have access to these files, or pay for access. Other government data is kept confidential for security reasons or to protect the privacy of individuals or corporations. For example, when you fill out the census questionnaire, the information about you is private and confidential. In Canada, a researcher can go to a Statistics Canada Research Data Centre to obtain access to a master microdata file, in which only you, as a researcher, would have access to the data you request. Since it is a long and rigorous vetting process, it is only recommended for faculty researchers or PhD candidates. When you are critiquing a dataset, look for documentation about the dataset. This can be a questionnaire, user guide, data dictionary, README file, or simply information on a website. If you can't find the information, you may have to contact a data librarian or the data producer for more information. As a researcher, there are some survey datasets in which you have access to description and documentation about the dataset, but you would have to apply directly to the data distributor to gain access via a mediated request. This is the case for data produced by the Canadian Institute for Health Information. Finally, it is costly to produce data, and some data producers charge money to gain access to their data. This is especially true of data produced for commercial purposes. Governments also charge for access to their data. York University Libraries pays annual subscriptions to provide you with access to a variety of data sources and platforms. These include Odyssey, Statista, ICPSR, DMTI, Simply Analytics, and other major sources of data. So if you ever see a $ associated with a dataset you are interested in, contact us at Data Services and email datalib@yorku.ca to see if we have access to it already, or to find out if we have similar data that you can use. With respect to aggregate data, this dataset can be found on Statistics Canada's data site. As you can see, this table is from the 2021 census. You can find data about visible minorities by groups. The smallest level of geography is a census metropolitan area. We can get data about shelter cost to income ratio, core housing needs, age, gender, and immigration status. What we can't get information about is if the housing is a rental or owned, the cost of the housing, income, or data at the level of municipality. Nor are data tables available for 2011 or 2016. On the other hand, we can use the public use microdata file for the 2016 census via Odyssey. Like the previous table, we can get disaggregated data about visible minorities. The lowest level of geography is at the provincial level. We have a variable about tenure, income, age, and gender. Some, not all, metropolitan areas are included. The 2021 PUMF data hasn't been released yet. As for limitations, we can't get data at the municipality level, nor can we get the variable shelter cost to income. Now let's move to the Canadian Housing Survey. When searching for data tables, I didn't find any on my topic. Instead, you can go to the Analysis portal on the Statistics Canada website to find reports, articles, and periodicals. Here I found several documents including Housing Experiences in Canada reports for 2021, which examine racialized groups including Black, Chinese, and South Asian populations. In these documents, you will find data about monthly shelter costs, core housing needs, and dwelling conditions, but only at the federal level. To get around these limitations, you can use the Canadian Housing Survey Public Use Microdata file. There, you will be able to get data down to the level of geography, with many of the variables on the checklist. But the visible minority variable is a yes or no variable. It isn't disaggregated. So this gives you a sense of the data landscape for your research question. There isn't a one-size-fits-all dataset that answers the specific question.